Hey, welcome to the Strong Roots podcast. My name is Kristin Hill, and we are so excited that you're tuning in today. Our prayer is that you would move one step closer to Jesus through this series. So go ahead and check out this next episode. Hey guys, welcome back. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is going to look a little differently than our regular episodes. Usually I have the privilege of interviewing somebody, but we decided that we're going to take a different route this time, and we're going to just have a heart-to-heart conversation. And I'm choosing topics that I really wish somebody would have talked to me about when I first began this journey. And so today, we're talking about how to be fearless as Christians and how to not look back. And when talking about being fearless, I think we should start with a really scary passage. That is what I'm going to do. And most of you have heard of this passage, whether it's on a street corner, whether it was in a sermon, but we're going to go to Matthew 7:13, and it's called the narrow gate. And it says, "You can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and the gate is wide for many who choose that way." It's kind of intense, right? I remember hearing that and being very fear-filled. For those of us who are listening and you're not afraid, it's most likely because you have chosen that narrow gate, right? And I think what's fortunate for us is that we can't always look back. Like, there are times where I have wanted to turn around and run the opposite direction, but the best part about this journey and choosing the narrow way is that I feel like Jesus makes it very, very hard to find your way back. Can anyone relate to that? And see, when we have trusted God and we have agreed to his ways, man, he has our future ahead of us, and he is leading us, and he is making our path so straight. And that is one of my favorite things about this. And I think talking about being fearless and being on this narrow road, it's a commitment. And when I think about commitment, it brings me back to childhood. And do you have memories growing up going to an amusement park? And back in the day in Minnesota, the best amusement park was called Valley Fair. And there was this new roller coaster called Wild Thing. And it was the biggest roller coaster at the time where I was from, and it was huge. And I remember waiting all day in line, getting all excited, then the creaks of the stairs going up, getting into that cart, putting that belt down, my hands all sweaty on the rail, right? And I remember going up, 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 up. And then when I hit the very top of that hill on the roller coaster, I had that split-second feeling of, what was I thinking? Like, this is so dumb. And I was so excited and so afraid at that point, but there was no turning back. And that's what I mean with this Christian walk. When you go on that narrow road, you're up there. There's no turning back, and there's so much excitement and there's so much fear. And it reminded me of being on a roller coaster. And it's interesting to me that so many of us are willing to pay to just helplessly fling ourselves over on a roller coaster. I get motion sickness personally, and we plunge ourselves into this. And the worst part about it is that a roller coaster, can we just admit, it goes nowhere. You literally go up and down and then around. And I feel like some of us listening, you're willing to spend money going on an exhilarating ride, going on a roller coaster, feeling the fear and excitement of that, and it's pointless. But you have never chosen to go on the ride. You've never chosen the greatest adventure in following Jesus because you're afraid. And I've heard that time and time again from people. I'm too afraid to follow Jesus. I'm too afraid of what's ahead. And it's interesting because if we go back to that verse, broad is the road that leads to destruction. When we are not following Jesus, when we're too afraid to follow him, we should be more afraid of not following him. Guys, I think a lot of us, our initial choice to follow Jesus was made, and we are unaware of what was going to come ahead of us. But we are warned in following Jesus that this road is going to be a hard one. For our master, Jesus himself, he walked a hard road. He reminds us that a servant is no greater than their master. But man, if we are given all the previews to come, we have the choice to follow a relentless path that Jesus gives us, or again, to continue the wide road that is easy, and that all of us, if you're a Christian, you've been on that road. And there have been many times on this road that I have looked back and longingly wished I could go back to my old life. And it reminds me of the Israelites back in the Old Testament, they were enslaved by the Egyptian people, and God was bringing them to this promised land that was going to be amazing. They were going to be blessed. But they constantly looked back and were like, that looked way better back there. I feel that more than I'd like to admit. But again, I feel like I'm so fortunate that even if I turn my head, God doesn't let me be able to turn back. That once you're on this narrow road, once you have the Holy Spirit, you're on it. So it's pointless looking back. Like Satan wants you to look back to waste time, to miss out on the potential and the future that God has for you. And honestly, there are so many times that I have felt like, what the heck is going on? One time in particular was when John and I first were married, and he was going to school and he was working full time, and I just had a baby, and I was in one of the deepest depressions of my life. I had never been so down, never been so lonely. And I was like, why is this happening? I'm following Jesus now. Shouldn't everything be amazing? God, where are you? And I remember him speaking to me, not audibly at all, but it was this knowing that was like, Kristin, what did you expect? You gave your life to me at 24. You told me that you'd do anything for me, that you would be willing to go anywhere for me, that you would die for me. And now you find yourself in a place where you don't want to be and you're questioning me? And how many of us can relate to that? I still do that, unfortunately. And I hate it, but it's true. I even know right now that sometimes when I feel like I'm losing it all and I'm breaking at the seams, is it really my business? I chose to give my life to Christ. It's his business. It's his decision what he does with my life. I willingly handed it over to him. It is God's business now. And it's not our job to question what he's going to do with our life once we've given it to him. The cost of discipleship is steep, but it is also the greatest decision that I have ever made. Choosing to follow Jesus, choosing to become more like him day in and day out, regardless of what I'm going through, regardless of what I'm suffering through, is the greatest adventure, is better than any roller coaster I could ever ride. And there's nothing and no one I would rather reflect than Jesus Christ himself. This is how we become fearless Christians. It's by trusting God that he is doing amazing things in the midst of our unknowns. I want us to go into following Christ, expecting that there are going to be challenges, expecting that there's going to be storms. But God will use them to level us up, to make us more like him, to do more on this earth than we could ever ask or imagine. I want you to ask this question. What part of your old life are you looking back longingly at? What part of your life do you still wish you can go and do? I know for me, there's lots of things. I think when I look back on my worst days, I wish I didn't have to care about anything anymore. I wish that I could lie. I wish I could do whatever I want, whenever I want, not be questioned, not feel convicted. When I look back and imagine, oh, that was so much easier. It was just so much easier when I had no standard. But here's the truth. Just like the Israelites were enslaved by the Egyptians, I was enslaved in my sin in the past. And it was torturous. I was dying, not only spiritually, but physically. And honestly, physically, like I didn't have good friends. I didn't have good relationships with my parents. Like things not only were affecting me spiritually, but they were affecting me in my everyday life. And for me to look back and be like, man, I wish I could go back there. It was so great. It's a lie. Just like the Israelites, it was a lie. It was a lie that things were better when the Egyptians were their masters. That is completely ridiculous. And when we look back, we need to realize that it is ridiculous. Our life in the past, our life on the broad road that leads to destruction was not good. And it was leading to death and leads to death every single time. So I want to challenge us. I think a lot of us, we have these thoughts that maybe we're afraid to share with anybody. Maybe we feel guilty. Maybe we feel that we'll be condemned. And honestly, the way that I have overcome these thoughts that I've had is confessing to another Christian believer. Confessing like, hey, I'm struggling wanting to go back. I'm struggling wanting to give up. I'm struggling to just give in to every sinful desire that I have. And if that's you and you can relate to that desire, I just want to ask you, tell someone you trust and confess to them. But not only confess, pray. Pray together that God would lead you out of this, that God would show you that his plans that he has for you in your future are far better than anything you had in the past. And the last thing that I want to challenge you with today is find a verse that you can memorize that will remind you that your future is far better with Christ than any other future you could have apart from him. And one of my favorite verses is actually in Philippians. It's Philippians 4:8. And it says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right, pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise." And I just love that, because when I'm looking in my past, or I'm wanting to do things that I know are not good for me or my relationship with God, literally, if it's not any of those things I just listed, I shouldn't be thinking about it. It's not going to be good for me. And usually just saying, fix your eyes on what is true, knocks it out. Like, is it true? No, I don't even need to go to honorable and right. Like, usually every time, okay, I'm not going to think about it. But this is my go-to verse. And I want to challenge you, you can steal this one, but pick your own verse that whenever you're questioning whether this is worth it, whenever you're tempted to look back, go to that verse and just say it to yourself and say it to yourself and say it to yourself, and don't look back. This is how we can become fearless as Christians, and this is how God will change the world through our lives. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I cannot wait till next episode to talk with you further. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on our other social media platforms. We don't want you to miss out on any future content. Thank you so much again, guys. I hope you have a great day. And I want you to know I am personally praying that your roots stay strong.